1984 was a magical playoff season for the Montreal Canadiens. This was a team that was in full decline. Guy Lafleur, pretty much done. Larry Robinson, probably not as great as he'd been during the late 70s. And who was their number one goaltender going to be? Savigny had let them down. I talked in a video not that long ago during this series about how Savigny hadn't really taken that mantle. Steve Penney. This was the spring of Steve Penney. Now, the Montreal Canadiens that year were 35, 40, and 5. And yet they got out of the first round relatively easily because they played Boston. And what's the rule in history? Montreal versus Boston's a bad matchup for Boston. So after sweeping aside the Boston Bruins with very little trouble, which was a series that, no, I wasn't going to cover in this because we're talking about great playoff series here and upsets and whatnot. Now, I don't have an Akbar magnet, even though the Montreal Canadiens were below 500, because they're the Montreal freaking Canadiens with Guy Lafleur, Larry Robinson, Guy Carbonneau, and numerous pretty darn good players you may know, Steve Shutt being another one of them. Goals for that year, 286, they were 18th overall. Goals against, 295, which was 7th overall. Their overall numbers were poor, and everybody was ready to declare them DOA until this playoff run. Quebec, they were 42, 28, and 10, the Quebec Nordiques, with the Stastny brothers, the three of them, all together, this great story. Eventually going to win a Stanley Cup. They have to. And there were numerous people, myself included, that hoped it would happen. I was really, really hopeful for Quebec going to this series. By the end of the series, it was quite a different story. Goals for, 360. That's second in the NHL. Goals against, 278, which was fifth. This series was remembered for two things. Well, okay, I'll say three. It was the Battle of Quebec. It was this amazing Battle of Quebec that featured an upset. Montreal Canadiens with this amazing run when everybody thought they were finished. And the Quebec Nordiques coming up short against Montreal, which would end up being a thing, and fighting. I think the biggest thing that came out of Game 6 that year was fighting. Lots of fighting. So people talk about, well, there's no fighting in the playoffs, but we need fighting during the regular season. There used to be a lot of fighting during the playoffs. Bench clearing brawls. And the brawl in this game, part of the reason we got rid of bench clearing brawls in the NHL. All right, so we start with Game 1 in Quebec. So Quebec, obviously with home ice advantage, being the team to finish with a lot more points than Montreal. Early in the first, Chris Nyland with a goal. From Chabot and Chelios at 1 minute and 53 seconds. Now, I'm saying Chabot, even though I'm pretty sure it was John Chabot back in the 80s, but since we've got a Chabot in the NHL now with the Ottawa Senators, I'll say Chabot. So, Marian Stastny then scores to tie it about 30 seconds later from Peter Stastny at 2 minutes and 22 seconds. All three Stastny brothers played on a line together, and it was absolutely as amazing as it sounds. Mark Hunter, though, would restore the lead from Bobby Smith at 9 minutes. And one of the storylines along here is that Mark Hunter is against his brother Dale in this series, and both of them known to drop the gloves here and there. Power play goal then for Quebec to tie it up again. Jean-François Sauvé scores from Mario Marois and Dale Hunter at 14:06. So it's 2-2 after one. Second period, only one goal is scored. That's by Quebec. It's Blake Wesley at 17:54. Third period, Louis Slager then scores for Quebec from Hunter and Goulet at 7:19. This is a series that featured absolutely no empty net goals. Imagine that now. No empty net goals over a 6-game series. Can't imagine it. So 84 penalty minutes in this game. That's a lot of penalty minutes for a playoff game, but it's nothing compared to where we're going to get. Penny, 28 saves on 32 shots for him. Bouchard saved 16 out of 28. And Dan Bouchard was one of my favorite goalies at this point in the league. Loved Dan Bouchard. I was so happy with all my Dan Bouchard hockey cards. And so, Quebec had a lead over Montreal. And this is how everybody thought it was supposed to go. But Game 2, Montreal decides to flip the script. There's no scoring in the first. Second period, there's one goal. It's Pierre Mondu, unassisted, at 9 minutes and 41 seconds. It's 1-0 Montreal after 2. But early in the third period, Anton Stastny from Marian Stastny at 36 seconds ties it up. So Quebec has a chance. If they score again here, they can go ahead and win this series, being up 2-0, going to Montreal. Montreal's a below 500 team, no problem. But power play goal by Naslund from Smith and Chabot at 6 minutes. And then Steve Shutt scores from Bob Gainey at 8:52. I mentioned Bob Gainey? No? Yeah, they still had Bob Gainey on this team. So Gainey and Carbonneau. Good luck scoring on those two guys. And then it's Perry Turnbull scoring for the Montreal Canadiens from Mario Tremblay and Rick Green at 17:30. This is before Montreal fans hated Mario Tremblay for something that would happen 12 years later. Now, there's 96 penalty minutes in this game that Montreal wins 4-1. So again, a lot of penalty minutes, some fighting in there, nowhere near where we're going to get. Penney saves 22 out of 23. Bouchard saves 20 out of 24. Remember, going into this playoffs, Steve Penney was kind of an unknown. It was this out of nowhere, this is great. And so Patrick Roy, who would emerge as the hero 2 years later, not even considered at this point because Penney, this kid's fantastic. Yeah, that Raw guy. This Penney guy's the future. Don't worry about that Raw guy. He may be a good goaltender someday, but this Penney guy's the future. Game 3, Montreal at home. They take a lead in the series. To get there, Bobby Smith scores a power play goal at 59 seconds from Mats Naslund and Chris Chelios. So Chelios. Again, this Montreal team, a lot of really good players just underachieved during the regular season. Pat Price then scores from Sauve and Goulet at 8:53. And second period, it's a power play goal for Ryan Walter. Yes, Ryan, fan of the channel and a friend of the channel. He gets a goal here from Lafleur and Robinson at 6:15. That has nothing to do with... Ryan, if you're watching this, hi. It has nothing to do with why I'm doing this. So third period, no, and yeah, that's weird for me. Really, really weird to know that Ryan Walters watched videos on this channel. Third period, that never gets not weird. Third period, there's no scoring in this one. Montreal holds on in a clean game. Only 40 penalty minutes in this game. Bouchard saves 27 out of 29. Great game for him. Penney, 16 saves on 17 shots. So the storyline out of this is that a Quebec team that's number 2 in the league in scoring with 360 goals during the regular season, they're limited to 17 shots by a stifling Montreal defense that has Robinson and Chelios on the blue line and Carbonneau and Gainey up front to help shut things down. That's not fair. So we go to game 4. Again, it's in Montreal, and Quebec answers. Not early, though. Power play goal for Ryan Walter from Naslund and Penney at 14:45. So again, a goaltender gets on the score sheet. Guy Carbonneau then scores from Larry Robinson at 19:50. That's one of those goals in the last few moments of a period that can really turn things around. Second period, however, Quebec, they do their job in what's the cleanest game of the series. Wolf Paymont scores from Peter Stastny and Blake Wesley at 13:36. Mario Tremblay restores the 2-goal lead from Guy Carbonneau at 17:31, but Andre Savard scores from Alain Cote at 18:51. That makes it 3-2 in favor of the Montreal Canadiens. Third period, Battle of Quebec, Randy Moeller. Yes, for people who know him from his commentary right now, that Randy Moeller. He scores from Peter Stastny and Anton Stastny at 11:23. That ties it up and forces overtime. In overtime, it's Bo Berglund scoring at 3 minutes. Montreal loses at home in overtime to the Quebec Nordiques. Quebec Nordiques even up the series. They avoid going down 3-1. Big sigh of relief. They now go home. They have home ice advantage back. Bouchard saves 17 out of 20 in the victory. They shut down Montreal's offense. Penney, 30 saves on 34 shots at the other end of the rink. He continues to be a hero for Montreal. He had folk hero status throughout these playoffs and into part of the season after. So we go to Game 5, and this is where Penney achieves status of, yeah, he is our starter. He's the guy. Sevigny, we'll see him on the board, but not for the reason that you might expect for a goaltender. No scoring in the first period of this one. Second period is Pierre Mondu, same as in Game 2, really. So in Game 5, Mondu from Ludwig and Naslund, that's Craig Ludwig, who, again, he's an announcer as well. 7:56, that makes it 1-0 in favor of the Montreal Canadiens. Third period, Tremblay scores from Gainey and Carbonneau at 4 minutes and 16 seconds. And then maybe a minute and a half, not even later, Steve Shutt scores at 5:36. And that's pretty much all she wrote in Quebec. Then a shorthanded goal from Naslund. Chabot with the assist at 7:04. So 4-0 is the score, and that is your final. This is the cleanest game. So we have 20 penalty minutes here in an overtime game. This one's 60 minutes. This one gets 18 penalty minutes. So it depends. Less penalty minutes here, less time played here. So they're both pretty clean games. No hint of what is to come. We can look back at these games with 84 and 96 penalty minutes and say, wow, were those games dirty? Yeah. Penney saves all 26 shots he faces for the shutout. Bouchard saves 20 out of 24 at the other end. And so coming out of Game 5, Montreal going home with a chance to win this. and things are going to get ugly. So first period, Quebec scores. It's Peter Stastny from Sauvé and Anton Stastny at 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Second period, there's no scoring, but there are penalties. At the end of the second period, there's a brawl. There is a huge, huge brawl. So before we get into the third period scoring, we need to discuss the brawl and a game that ended up with 222 penalty minutes. 222 penalty minutes in one game. Most of them at the end of the second period. Let's just talk about who got game misconducts. Game misconducts to Peter Stastny, which is huge, right? Taking him out of the game for that long, huge. Richard Sevigny, so the backup goaltender for Montreal, he's out. Louis Slager, Quebec. Chris Nyland, Montreal. Mario Tremblay, Montreal. Wally Weir of Quebec. Hunter and Hunter. So both Dale and Mark got thrown out for being involved in this brawl. Clint Malarchuk, backup goaltender for Quebec. Yeah, he's out. And Mike McPhee of the Montreal Canadiens, game misconduct. You're out of here. So when we talk about brawls between Montreal and Quebec, that's the one that we're talking about. And so I have to talk about that before we get into the scoring. And keep in mind now, this throws off all your lines. This throws off your complete game. And this is in Montreal. So who's that going to fire up? Well, early in the third, it fires up Quebec, apparently. Michel Goulet, 2 minutes and 2 seconds in, makes it 2-0 in favor of Quebec. Sigh of relief likely for the guys on the bench, like, okay, we're going to get out of here. We're going to go to Game 7. We should be good. Montreal has other plans. Steve Shutt from Smith and Mondew at 6:23 makes it 2-1. Shutt scores again from Mats Naslund at 9 minutes and 11 seconds. Mats Naslund, a forgotten guy who was a pretty darn good player in his day as well. So 2-2, and then is Rick Green scoring for Bobby Smith at 12 minutes and 14 seconds. That was a trade that was, those are guys both came over in trades that were panned at the time, and those trades worked out pretty well here. Green and Walter came over. I'm trying to remember with Smith. I know that trade ended up being panned at the time. Basically, the idea was Montreal was being mismanaged. This playoff run, followed by 86, where they'd win the Stanley Cup, proved that maybe it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. Yes, they lost Rod Langway, but they did pretty well. Chabot would score from Lafleur and Naslund at 13:27. So Guy Lafleur not on the board very much at all. I think that's 2 assists. I think that's all he's on the board for in this series. And yet, here we go. Carbonneau scores from Ryan Walter at 14:25. That makes it suddenly 5-2. Wolf Paymont then scores from Sauvé and Cote at 16:51. Makes it 5-3, and that's as close as Quebec's going to get. The Quebec Nordiques, right up until they left the city of Quebec, well, Quebec City. And people are going to say, well, the Quebec's a province. I know. Well, up until they left Quebec City, this was something that kind of hung over their heads. That they were a team that they would get ahead, they would have chances to put Montreal out, and they'd lose it. Or other series as well, where they would have a chance and they'd lose it. And this series definitely, in my eyes, this is where it starts. Where Quebec's the better team with a better roster. Montreal's seen as kind of old and broken and not as good as they were. Montreal pulls it together, and Quebec's unable to answer it. Bouchard saved 21 out of 26 in the loss. Penney saved 21 out of 24 in the victory. And he goes on with the rest of the Habs to lose in the conference final to the New York Islanders in 6. That was the 19th straight series won by the New York Islanders before they would go on and face the Edmonton Oilers in the finals and lose. And Montreal fans could look at that series and say, we wore them down. You're welcome, Edmonton. We wore them down. We had all our best guys out there. We wore down the New York Islanders. We're the reason that the Oilers won. So, there's that. We are up to the 1984 playoffs. And again, this was a great series. Absolutely fantastic. I would hope that, and people have talked about them re-showing old series and old games on the NHL Network or on various NHL entities. This is my vote right here. Again, I remember being a little kid, really cheering for Quebec. I really wanted to see the Nordiques go somewhere. And this is kind of why every now and then I'll say, I think I'm a jinx. Because even as a kid, I was like, is it me? Did I make the... Because Quebec was great all year. Was it me? All right. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.